In this video, I'm going to be sharing with you the exact Klaviyo pop-up form strategy that's consistently generating over 10% submit rates for our clients, meaning out of all the traffic that's coming to their website, 10% are choosing to, opt into their email list, all right? And after generating $51 million in e-commerce sales, we've tested thousands of different variations for these pop-up forms. So if you implement everything I'm going to show you in this video here, it's going to save you a ton of time, trying to A/B test everything and track everything yourself. It's also going to make you a lot more money. When your list is growing at 2 to 3x rate that it's currently growing at, you're going to have a lot more people on your email list. You're going to have a lot more touch points with those people. And if you didn't have their email contact, they would have came to your website from an ad and would have just bounced before they became a customer and disappeared forever. Now you have the ability to nurture them, sort of indoctrinate them into your brand, and eventually convert them when they're ready. Now, this is especially important because, in a world where the cost of advertising and cost to acquire new customers is constantly increasing, you need to have as many advantages as possible. You need to have as many free touch points as possible. And the best way to do that is with your email and SMS. Your only other alternative is spend more money on ads, pay for more impressions with them that way via retargeting. But, this way you're able to follow up with them forever for free until they either purchase from you or unsubscribe. So before we dive into the video, first thing, if you want to download this doc, the link is in the description. All right, diving in. So how to build pop-ups that convert at 10% plus conversion rate, and how getting 10% opt-in rates is the easiest way to 2x your email revenue growth rates. All right, we've generated over $51 million in revenue for clients with these strategies. So as you can see right here, screenshots from our client accounts. Now we're able to consistently generate these very high submit rates. I'm going to show you how to do that in this video here. All right. And again, the more people you get on your list, the more you're going to be able to generate with your email marketing. That's pretty self-explanatory. All right. Why is this important? Increased competition. Exponentially more e-commerce brands are competing for attention in 2025 than in previous years. Increasing ad costs, as more competitors are entering the market and bidding for the same ad space that you are, ad costs and cost to acquire customers are continuing to increase, all right? And it's just gonna get worse. Tighter economy, all right, so we're bringing in macroeconomic factors here. Customers have less money than 2020 when the government was literally handing out free money. The cost of living has skyrocketed since then. And now with this whole, uncertainty around the tariffs, input costs are increasing. So yeah, it's just kind of getting worse all around. Now, how do we deal with this? One more thing I want to mention here too is the hidden cost of poor pop-up performance. And the reason I have to bring this up is because, a lot of e-commerce brands kind of overlook this. They're kind of like, yeah, I set up the pop-up form in Klaviyo and, it's converting at, 4% or whatever. But, and then they always want to know, well, what email should I send? But before we even get into the emails, it's like, all right, the most obvious thing to do is collect more emails. You know what I mean? So that starts with the pop-up form. And here's the cost of having poor pop-up form performance. So number one, wasted ad traffic. Especially if you're running ads, you're wasting a ton of money because you're not capturing as many people as you otherwise potentially could, right? So it's essentially a leaky pipe, right? You're funneling water through the pipe, but you're losing like 20% of the water, right? So visitors come to your website and leave without converting or joining your list, right? It's basically like lighting money on fire. So you want to capture those people and get them to purchase from you in the future. Number two is lost future revenue. Currently, you have no way to nurture these prospects into customers over time. And I'm talking about the prospects who come to your website and would have opted into your list, would have started developing some sort of, customer relationship with you, but otherwise didn't because your pop-up wasn't that good. Number three, higher acquisition costs. So if you don't have a prospect's email, it's significantly more difficult to convert them if they don't buy right away, leading to a higher cost to acquire new customers. So like I mentioned, if somebody comes to your website and you don't have their email, the odds that they buy from you in the future is exponentially lower than if you had their email and you were blasting them with high quality content and on the occasional offer every couple days, let's just say. All right, now let's talk about the e-commerce market segments. Just to give some context to what I'm going to be talking about with why the pop-ups are so important. All right, so 2% are ready to buy right away. And this kind of goes for any market, but especially the e-commerce market. Only 2% of the people who click your ads are going to come to your website and purchase from you on their first visit. And I mean, like, you could easily see this in your Shopify stats. Your website conversion rate is probably 2%, and that's considered good, depending on what you sell, of course. But 98% aren't ready to buy yet, so most visitors need more information, trust, or time before buying. Especially with the amount of options that they have, they're going to search around and sort of make sure that they feel like they've done their due diligence on searching around your different competitors before they make a buying decision. Now, it's your responsibility to be able to get their contact information, have better emails than anybody else, and win their business that way. And then number 3, repeated ad exposure. Without their email, you're forced to pay for ad impressions instead of free email impressions. Right? So basically you're paying for something that you otherwise would be able to get for free by sending them email campaigns and email flows as part of your current Klaviyo strategy. All right, so the typical e-commerce sales journey is number 1, when they first get introduced to your brand, either through a social post or a Facebook ad, they're completely cold. They don't know anything about you. And basically you have no trust with them. All right, so this is cold traffic. Number 2 is warming them up. All right, each impression, whether it's from an ad, email content, time on the website, or they follow you on socials, etc., builds familiarity and warms them up. If somebody's been following you for 6 months, they see your ads, they're on your email list, they're gonna buy from you eventually, just because they're a lot more familiar with you. They know you're not like some scam company. So it's your job to continually warm them up with high quality content, and eventually you're going to put an offer in front of them or release a new product, and it's they're going to be in that buying window where you have the opportunity to convert them. So it's your job to stay in contact with them until that window opens up. And then number 3, ready to buy, the point where a prospect has enough information and trust to buy. So like I mentioned, all you got to do is just stay in front of them until that window opens up, and then they buy from you. And you do that by collecting their email information and obviously running a quality email marketing strategy. Part 1, the offer. Now, the offer is the most important variable and the most important aspect of your pop-up that you need to test. This will have the greatest impact on your submit rates, all right? Number 2 is going to be the percentage versus dollar value. So this is as basic as it gets, and it's a super easy thing to test. Let's say you're offering 10% off, which is sort of the default offer. You could easily convert that to a dollar value and see if that outperforms the percentage. Pretty much random whether it works for your brand or not. There's no real, I see people on YouTube where it's like, oh, if you have an AOV of this, like do dollar off. I personally haven't seen a pattern with that, and it's simple enough to test, so I would just test it. And like I wrote here, so sometimes dollar value outperforms 10% off. So for example, $5 off orders of $50 threshold outperforms 10%. And you can test the dollar equivalent of the 10% you normally give by playing around with the dollar amount and order threshold, all right? And there's sort of a balance you could strike between the attractiveness of the offer, the amount of margin you're giving away, as well as the desired average order value. So for instance, you could test out $5 off 50, you could test out offers of $7 off 70, things like that. A big contrasting font. All right, so you want to make sure that the offer is the first thing that people see or notice when your pop-up appears. I see a lot of pop-ups where, like they're all the same font, like $10 off, but also sign up to our newsletter to get, weekly tips and stuff. Like nobody really cares about that stuff. They just, what's in it for me, essentially is what they're thinking. And you're essentially offering 10% or whatever the offer is in exchange for their email. That's a pretty good trade to most people. So it needs to be the biggest font and contrast with the background. And I'll show some examples here in a second. All right, so here are some examples. Let's see if we could zoom in. There we go. All right, so here's one. As you can see, pretty much the only text here is year supply giveaway. That's a pretty solid offer in exchange for the email. All right, now if you have a lot more details about sort of a giveaway or the offer or the order threshold or whatever, you can include that in your welcome email or on the success page of the pop-up form. A big mistake I see is, let me put it all on the pop-up form. We don't need to complicate it. We just need them to put in their emails and then you can explain like the fine print later, okay? Here we got another one. I don't know if that shows up super well, so let's take $5 off your first order and email address and then dog birthday. This one works pretty well for, dog brands, just because people like to put in their dog birthday, and it gives you some information for things like a dog birthday flow, etc. So, but you got to make it optional because some people don't want to put that stuff. By requiring it, you're gonna decrease your conversion rates. We'll get to that here in a second. Here's another one. This is for a jewelry brand. Now, notice how down here, the cursive, you can't really read it, but you don't really need to. The main thing that people need to know is that it's 10% off their next order. Give us your email in exchange for 10%. And if you're selling, especially high-ticket jewelry, that's like a free $100. Like who's not gonna sign up for that? All right, part 2, make sure that you have one field per step. I see a lot of these brands where they ask for 3 different fields. Oh, give us your email, give us your first name, give us your phone number, all in the same step. Now, you could ask for all that stuff, just make sure that it's, on different steps. So for instance, here I have an example. This one right here, this is an example of a low converting pop-up form. And here's an example of the same pop-up form with 1 field per step. So like I mentioned, if you want to collect multiple fields, put them on different steps. In this case, you have an email address. They put in their email address. It takes them to step 2, which in this case could be, the SMS. It's like, oh, get a mystery offer. And then actually for this particular brand, if they give us their SMS as well, it upgrades them to 10% off. So, and that works pretty well. So the main thing is you only want to be asking for 1 field of information at a time. The more fields you have, the lower your submit rate will be. And yeah, pretty much what I just explained. Part 3, the time delay and sizing. So timing, all right, firing instantly annoys users. Waiting too long, like 25 plus seconds, means too few will see it, all right? Somewhere between 6 and 14 seconds is the sweet spot. Now, what I've noticed is most brands that we work with tend to err on the side of, making the delay too long, and you're gonna lose out on people who are only on the website for 10 seconds. Just because subjectively brand owners, like they go on their website all the time, and they might think, like it's very common, oh, the pop-up is appearing too fast, but it's like, no, you're just used to scrolling around on your website. But the reality is, if somebody's scrolling around on your website for like 10 seconds, they're not going to mind if a pop-up that they could easily close out of, pops up. Like that's, what most brands, you kind of expect to pop up, So just make sure it's not firing right away or in the first like 5 seconds or something, and then you're good. But don't wait too long, obviously. Number 2 is going to be the visible exit button. All right, so forms that don't have an exit button or one that blends in with the background will annoy users and increase bounce rates. I see some people where they say, oh, like you want to make the exit button not that visible. I disagree with that. Obviously, that's going to cause some problems. You don't want to like force people to joining your email list, and those people who otherwise might have stayed on the website and would have been convinced by some sort of product to convert or something, now they're annoyed and now they're bouncing. Okay, so you don't want to do that. Number 3, large pop-ups are better than small pop-ups. So your pop-up should take up most of the screen. Small pop-up forms don't convert as well as big pop-ups generally. So keep that in mind, especially on mobile too. Another thing too is in Klaviyo, you're going to be able to test out different pop-up formats. So one of them is going to just be called pop-up. The other one's going to be called full screen. So you want to test that out as well. On the pop-up, you generally want to be taking up most of the screen anyway, but then full screen, it's going to take up the entire screen. I've seen both work, and really it depends on the brand, so you got to test it. All right, more pop-up form examples on mobile. So here we have one for a weed brand. You can see it's a green background with kind of green text, but it still stands out. This one converts really well, basically giving away a free gift, free rolling tray. And then you could have this stuff down here. It doesn't really matter. 1 field per step, and that's it. This one right here, they sell duckies for their keyboard, like keyboard keycaps. And this one's super simple. And again, this is mobile. Typically, simple actually converts the best, but the main text here is 10% off. All right, we have some sort of filler text here. Give us your email, unlock offer, and that's it. Right? It doesn't need to be super fancy. This one here too, this is a supplement brand. Get 10% off your first order. You could give a bit of a description about the product if you want. Enter your email, claim 10% off. And also another thing too with the CTA, you might want to play around with this, but you generally want to stay away from things like, oh, submit your email or whatever the default CTA is. Make it about sort of what's in it for them. In this case, they want their 10%, so claim 10% off. That's what we use, and that typically is what works the best. Now we got some desktop examples. This is for a women's clothing brand. $15 off your order. Sign up for our email and enjoy $15 off your next order. Now, this brand has, an order threshold, meaning the $15 only applies on orders of like $120, right? But you don't need to put all that information on this pop-up. You put it on the success form, the success page of the pop-up form, or on the welcome email one. This one here, supplement brand. Get 10% off your first order, and this is just the desktop version of that mobile. Both versions convert well, but this one, we're just adding a bit more sort of decoration here with the product image, but overall it's pretty simple. This one here too, another supplement brand, super simple. There's no filler really. It's just, do you want our offer? Yes, give me the offer, or no thanks. And then we got a cool little, photo of the product there. All right, so now at this stage, I gave you the principles of how you want to sort of set these up, and I gave you some visual examples. So right now I'm going to show you step by step how to set up your own and how to think about all this when you're setting up your high converting pop-up form. So step one, you're going to need to establish the offer. Again, this is the most important part. You just need to start with something, and then from there you could sort of A/B test the offer. And this is going to be the highest impact thing that you can A/B test. And I'll get into some, tips for how I A/B test and how I'd recommend that you do it as well. But establishing your first offer here, so you have a few different options. So the default one is percentage off. It works, it's worth testing non-round numbers, for example, for a pattern interrupt effect, like 12% off. Just because literally every brand has 10%, 15%, so customers can be a bit numb to that. They kind of just default to exiting out of it. So it's worth testing this out to sort of pattern interrupt them, and with like a random number like, 11% off, Doesn't always work, but it's worth a shot. You could run that as an A/B test. It's super simple to set up. Dollar amounts, all right? So again, play around with the dollar amount off and the order threshold to find a good balance of submit rate, margins, and average order value. Number three is going to be the free gift, so including a small item with purchase. Now, this is especially effective if you have some sort of item in stock that, number one, you're trying to sell out of, number two, is a low cost to produce, and number three, it's valuable to the customer. So for example, with a supplement brand, one that has worked well for us is Blender Bottle. They're buying your whey protein, and to use it, you need a blender bottle. So if you have a blender bottle, it's low cost to produce, then why not offer that and test that out instead of 10% off or whatever. Number three is going to be a mystery discount. So this one's basically leveraging the curiosity angle, and it works quite well if you can't sacrifice too much of your margins on discounts. So for example, for us, it's worked really well where, we have clients who will be selling a product where the margins are thin and they can only offer things like $5 off, which might not be too attractive on a higher ticket item. So what we do there is we frame it as a mystery discount, all right? Get them to sign up, and by the time they sign up, read some of the content. If the content is good, they're not gonna care so much that it's only $5 off, you know what I mean? They're already in your email list, they're reading some good content, they're interested in the product, and the $5 or whatever your sort of low offer is just a bonus at that stage. Step two, you're gonna wanna choose your form type. All right, so there's a few different ways to go about it, but the standard sort of default one is basically what I showed you earlier. It's just the simple email opt-in on step one. All right, so for example, somebody comes to your website, and after the time delay, it pops up, and the first thing that pops up is, here's the offer, give us your email in exchange for the offer. So it's the opt-in for step one, and it works, it's effective. It might not work the best out of all the options, but it's a good place to start. Step two is going to be the micro commit. So this is basically asking a yes or no question on step one. So for example, do you want 10% off? And then asking for their email, on step 2. This gets higher submit rate on roughly 60% of brands. It's definitely worth testing. And essentially all you do is you just add an additional step before the email opt-in. So this could even be your first A/B test that you run. Pretty simple to set up and could get you a easy boost to your submit rate. And then the third option is going to be the quiz. So this is basically where you gather information while offering a personalized discount. And essentially how it works is you ask a multiple choice question, asking them to categorize themselves on step 1, and then asking for their email on step 2. So number 1, it might boost your engagement rates, which would increase the amount of people who submit their email on step 2. It really depends on the brand, but people like to answer questions about themselves, and it really depends on the brand. So for instance, one that we see it work really well for is supplement brands, especially if you serve different types of customers. So you might have marathon runners versus high intensity interval training cardio type people. You might have weight training people. So you ask them that on step 1. It's like, all right, what type of athlete are you? And then step 2, it's like, congrats, for your specific, demographic, we offer 10% off, or whatever the case may be. We offer a free, blender bottle for your whey protein, to use that example again. So you can play around with it. It also gives you profile property information that allows you to segment better on the campaigns and flows. So you get that, and that's sort of just a bonus if you increase the submit rate. So definitely worth testing out, especially if you serve multiple different customer avatars. All right, step 3, now you're ready to actually create the form. And the first thing you want to decide is what platform you want to do it on. So you could choose between Klaviyo, where it's sort of built in natively, or you could use specialized platforms like Alia is sort of the new meta for this pop-up for higher performance. So I typically recommend, if you don't have pop-up set up, to just start on Klaviyo. If you already are on Klaviyo, you're probably better off, just running some A/B testing for a while on Klaviyo before you upgrade to Alia is really good. We've seen significant increases for our clients, so definitely worth checking out if you feel like you've already squeezed out all the optimization from your Klaviyo pop-up form. 6 to 14 seconds delay. So when you're setting up your pop-up form, it's going to ask you, what is your desired time delay? Now, this is something you could A/B test in the future, but I would recommend just starting, somewhere between 6 if you want to be a bit more aggressive, 14 is a bit more conservative. And this is what we found to be the optimal timing window for showing your pop-up form after the page loads for your website visitors. And then number 3 is going to be your conversion goal. You're aiming for 10% plus, all right? Now, there's going to be some variation for certain brands. It's also going to depend a bit on, how high quality your traffic is, but this is the typical benchmark for a high-performing pop-up in e-commerce. Both Klaviyo and specialized tools like Alia have templates you can start with, but you'll need to customize and test extensively. The odds that you get, a really good conversion rate off the bat, I mean, it does happen, especially if you implement a lot of what I'm showing you here, but it also might take you, a fair amount of A/B testing as well. So I definitely recommend tracking your tests, tracking your hypotheses and results on a spreadsheet or on your notes app. It's not super difficult to do. Just whenever you have an idea for how you can test it, just write it down. Then when you come back to your computer and you review your test, you're either and you're ready to test the next thing, just write it down and then set up the next test. Usually takes like 2 seconds, unless you're testing something a bit more extensive that involves changing up the welcome flow a little bit, in which case it might take a bit more effort, but it's definitely worth it, especially if you increase your website submit rate. I mean, that's like a permanent boost to your email list and your email marketing growth. All right, step 4, the winning pop-up checklist. All right, so when you're setting it up, you're going to want to consult this to just make sure that you're meeting all the best practices. So number 1 field per step. Never ask for email and SMS on the same screen, for instance. Just ask one thing per step. Number 2 is going to be that 6 to 14 second time delay, which is, from my experience, the sweet spot to capture the maximum amount of visitors while annoying the minimum amount of people. Step 3, you're going to want to exclude the pop-ups from certain pages. So make sure you exclude certain pages from showing the pop-up, such as the cart page and checkout page. All right, so essentially when you're setting up the pop-up form, there's gonna be an exclusion option. You just wanna type in page includes or URL includes /cart or /checkout, because obviously when somebody's initiating checkout, you don't want to interrupt that process by capturing their email. You want them to check out. You know what I mean? Step 4, large is generally most of the time more effective than small. Your pop-up should take up the most of the screen. Small pop-up forms don't convert as well as big pop-ups, generally speaking. Step 5, big contrasting font for the offer. You want it to stand out, and you want it to be the first thing that they notice when the pop-up appears on their screen. Number 6, a visible close button. Make sure your close button is visible to minimize bounce rates. You don't want to hide the close button. Some people just don't want to sign up for your email list. So yeah, just don't do that. All right, step 5, the A/B testing strategy. So number 1, first thing you want to do is focus on testing the offer. Obviously, this is the highest impact variable, so it makes sense to put most of your testing time into testing out the offer. Test different discount amounts and different types. Number 2 is going to be testing out the form type. So test between the classic, micro commit, and quiz form types that I mentioned earlier up here. Step 3, teasers. So I didn't cover this earlier, but basically the teaser is sort of that little thing that pops up in the corner of the screen when somebody X's out of the pop-up form. Generally, having a teaser is going to increase the conversion rates over pop-ups that don't have the teaser, just because it gives you another opportunity to convince the person, oh, okay, you know what, maybe I will trade my email for 10% or whatever your offer is. Although there are a fair amount of brand owners who don't like the teaser, even if it does increase their submit rate. So there's a balance to be had there. Just test it out, see if it works for you, and if it does, then that's great. You could also test out different placements, shapes, and copy on the teaser. So you can move around the teaser to different corners of the screen. You could change, what shape it is. There's a triangle, there's a circle, and there's a rectangle option. I wouldn't recommend the rectangle on mobile because it takes up a lot of the screen, but the other 2 options are worth testing. Step 4, test the timing. All right, find the optimal time delay that maximizes the amount of form submits, not necessarily the form submit rate, because, all right, if you have an 100-second time delay, that would get a pretty high form submit rate just because the people who've stayed on your website for 100 seconds are pretty high intent versus in the sweet spot, which is, let's say, 10 seconds, you're going to have probably a lower submit rate than 100 seconds, but you're going to have a higher number of absolute form submissions. So that's what you want to be optimizing for. Step 5, you want to test the design. So images, colors, copy, and layout all impact performance. So definitely worth testing out, but not necessarily the first thing that I would test out. You have higher impact things you could test out. And then finally, you want to track your tests, write down ideas for future tests, and record the test results in a spreadsheet or notes app. It's pretty simple to do, just requires a little bit of organization, but funny enough, most brands won't do it, and that there presents the opportunity for you if you're willing to log into your Klaviyo every once in a while and test stuff out. Now, the path to 10% conversion rate. So number 1, you want to start with proven templates. That's going to shortcut, your path from, having to reinvent the wheel. Begin with winning templates and customize it to fit your brand. So the link to this doc is in the description. You're going to be able to, take a look at my swipe file that has high converting pop-up forms. So just go in there, use that as, inspiration or whatever, and customize it to your brand. Step 2, apply the best practices. Basically, just implement everything, all the principles that I showed in this video to shortcut the optimization process. Step 3, always be testing. Run consistent A/B tests, focusing on one variable at a time. I don't see why you wouldn't always be testing. You're getting free data from, your ad spend anyway. You're sending traffic to your website. That's free data. Why would you not be using that to tell you what does your traffic respond to the best in terms of, your pop-up form? Number 4, analyze and iterate. So not every test is going to lead to an increase, but you will occasionally pick up small wins, and those small gains compound over time. And you want to be, iterating on that over time. Eventually, that's how you go from a 3% conversion rate pop-up to 10%, just stacking these small 1% wins over time. Step 5, list growth leads to revenue growth. As your list growth rate increases, your email revenue will multiply, especially if you're also optimizing flows and campaign conversion rates. And this one's pretty obvious. If you have more people on your email list, you're going to have more opportunities to convert more people. That's going to result in a higher email revenue. And the difference between a 3% and a 10% pop-up could mean literally hundreds of thousands of dollars in additional revenue over the course of a year. And what would you do with an additional 6 figures of revenue per year? For most brands, that would be pretty critical. You can spend it on a bunch of different stuff, all right? And all you got to do is just consistently test your pop-up form. And obviously you need to have a good, email marketing strategy as well. You can't be sending, terrible emails, because then that's just going to be, all this would be a huge waste of time anyway. So, all right. So if you watched to the end of this video here, you have earned the opportunity to steal my templates. So if you would like access to the swipe file here, it basically contains all of the, highest percentage converting pop-up forms. So you'll be able to go in there, use it as inspiration, customize it to your brand, and go from there. So if you want that, link is in the description. And yeah, other than that, thanks so much for watching this video here. I'm going to link a few other videos around the screen here showing you how to design your emails, let's just say. So thanks so much for watching.